Burning questions.
Insightful answers.
Listener's choice.
With Clement Manyathela.
So, on our Listener's Choice feature today, we are unpacking the business rescue process. What goes into this intricate process? One of our listeners has chosen this topic for today, asking that we look at what goes into the business rescue process. And of course, in this country, this term is quite a common one we often hear, right? It's become widely recognized, especially because there are a number of companies that have entered this process, a number of state-owned entities as well that have entered business rescue. And the bid is always to try and avoid collapse. But what does this business rescue actually mean? How does the process work? And who is ultimately protected when an organization is declared financially distressed? What are the warning signs that a company or even a state-owned entity is heading towards business rescue, and who even makes the final decision to place it under business rescue? These are some of the questions our listeners have. So we've invited someone this morning who is going to guide us through this conversation to understand what goes into a business rescue process. What does it entail? But if you've got your questions yourself, please feel free to give us a call on 011-883-0702. You can send WhatsApps as well on 072-702-1702. Kylene Weyers is an associate director at BDO who's going to guide us through this conversation. Kylene Weyers, thank you so much for making time for us. Kylene, good morning.
Hi, Clement. Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. So let's start just in the beginning, by laying the foundation. So when we talk about business rescue, how different is it from like liquidation, in our context here?
So, Clement, in a nutshell, business rescue is about saving a company and liquidation is about shutting it down. So the business rescue process in South Africa is governed by Chapter 6 of the Companies Act, and it's aimed at rescuing companies in financial distress. And it's also all about preserving value and saving jobs, whereas liquidation, on the other hand, is the winding up of a company, and the company ultimately ceases to exist and the jobs are all lost. So it's therefore a last resort mechanism for companies that are hopelessly insolvent. Okay,
so a business rescue may end up in a liquidation process.
Yes, if there are no longer reasonable prospects of success in the rescue.
Got you. Okay, so who decides when a company needs to undergo business rescue? Is it the executive of the company? Is it people the company owes? How does it work? How is the decision taken?
There are two ways that a company can go into business rescue. The first way, and the more common way, is that the board of directors of a company can adopt a resolution to voluntarily place the company in rescue. So it's quite an easy process. The directors obviously just need to be on board and they file a resolution with the CIPC. The second way that a company can go into business rescue is if an affected person applies to court to put the company in business rescue, and we call this a compulsory business rescue. So in most instances, it's a creditor that's applied to court to put the company in rescue.
Oh, so a creditor would do that. And are there warning signs that a company is heading towards business rescue? And what do you look out for? What are some of those warning signs to say, we could end up in a business rescue process here?
Absolutely, Clement. Companies don't collapse overnight. There are always warning signs that companies must be aware of. So some signs of distress include, for example, persistent cash flow problems. The company can't pay their debts as they fall due. So, for example, they can't pay their creditors and employees and suppliers as they fall due. If the company is defaulting on loans, and if the company's debt is just mounting, those are some of the major warning signs we look out for.
And what happens to the management and the directors, the executives? So if there are business rescue practitioners that are running the process, are they doing that in conjunction with the management, with the directors?
So when the company goes into business rescue, a business rescue practitioner is appointed, whose ultimate responsibility is to restructure the affairs of the company and to develop a business rescue plan. The practitioner has full management control of the company in substitution for its board and pre-existing management, but the directors and management still stay involved in the company operationally, but rather they act under the authority and the supervision of the practitioner. They still need to cooperate and work with the practitioner.
And who do they answer to, those practitioners? Do they report, and are they accountable, for instance, to the creditors? Are they accountable to, who do they report to?
So,
or even the court?
Yes, so as business rescue practitioners, we are accountable to all affected persons in the process, which includes the creditors and employees of the company. And we are also officers of the court, so we have the full responsibilities and duties of a director of the company. We also have fiduciary duties under Section 77 of the Companies Act, like all other directors. But I think it's important to note that our role as practitioners is to balance competing interests in the rescue process and to deliver the best possible outcome overall. It's not about serving one group over the other. We are about balancing competing and stakeholder rights and interests.
Mm-hmm. How expensive is this process, Kylene? Or does it depend? Of course, I'm sure it depends also on how big the organization is. But is it quite an expensive process?
So, business rescue practitioners' fees are actually prescribed by the Companies Act. So BRPs will charge an hourly rate, which is linked to a tariff depending on the size of a company. So it's not a flat hourly rate. It's linked to the size of the company, and BRPs can formally agree with creditors to charge a higher hourly rate or to charge a success fee, but it's not easy to answer the question as to how much it costs, because it really depends on the size of the company, how long the rescue ultimately takes.
Okay. That's fascinating. I've got some calls and some WhatsApps as well coming from our listeners on 011-883-0702. So we'll start with the WhatsApps now on 072-702-1702.
Good morning, Clement, the guest. It's Bongani here. I went through business rescue with SAA, and it's not a nice thing whereby they wind up everything. And then what said the most is that we went through Section 189. Section 189, last in, first out. And we were told we'll be called back once the airline has grown. The airline is moving. That Section 189 was never honored. And we still left behind. Painful as it is, it's a very, very painful process. I feel pity for those people who are in that section experiencing it now. We are still suffering even now. I can't count the number of former colleagues that have passed on. Bongani, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Bongani. So, Kylene, I suppose the question there then is, every business rescue process, will it always end up in some retrenchment? Is that always the case?
No, Clement, it's not always the case, but I think maybe I should just start off by saying that in relation to the position of employees in a business rescue, the rights of employees are fully catered for and protected under Chapter 6 of the Companies Act. In fact, employees are elevated in the business rescue process. So the position is that when a company goes into business rescue, the employees remain employed on the same terms and conditions as they were before the rescue, and so their contracts do continue. However, retrenchments can still take place during the process, but it must be done strictly in accordance with our labor laws. There must be fair labor practices. And so, yes, retrenchments are unfortunately a huge part of business rescue in assisting the financially distressed company with restructuring its affairs. But employees must always be protected under the labor laws. And I'd also like to say that, while not all jobs of employees can be guaranteed in the business rescue process, it is important to note that one of the major purposes of business rescue is to save as many jobs as possible. It's one of the reasons that business rescue actually came about. But unfortunately, it is a really sad part of the process that not all employees can be kept. But like I said, the Section 189 process, under the Labour Relations Act needs to be followed.
Hi, Clement. I'm curious about the difference between business rescue and judiciary management,
Accountable, for instance, to the creditors,
which was previously the model used as a rescue mechanism. Why was there a shift from judiciary management to business rescue, and what are the benefits, and what have the actual realized benefits been if we compare the two models?
Okay, so the difference then between judicial intervention, Kylene, and business rescue?
So we used to have judicial management, which was just leading to liquidations the majority of the time. The legislature and the regulators knew that we needed something better. And that's where business rescue came about. And we are having far more success with business rescue because one of the main aims of business rescue is to avoid a liquidation. And so I'd say that's the simple answer to what the difference is between judicial management and business rescue. Business rescue is leading to more successful, restructures of companies. Whereas in the past, a lot of these viable businesses would go into liquidation, and that is before we had this very dynamic mechanism of business rescue in South Africa.
Okay. Another question here says, if a business rescue fails and liquidation follows, are there consequences for the directors or executives, that management, or any, especially when there's also a bit of wrongdoing that is uncovered? And can a business rescue process also uncover that?
Yes. So just to take a step back, the Companies Act provides that once a business rescue practitioner is appointed, he or she must investigate the company's affairs, its business, its property and financial situation. If the practitioner finds any evidence of reckless trading or fraud or any criminal conduct, then the practitioner must report the evidence to the relevant authorities for further investigation and possible prosecution. Now, should liquidation eventually follow, one of the powers that a liquidator has is that they can actually convene an insolvency inquiry and properly investigate what transpired even further. And if any wrongdoing or reckless trading is uncovered, directors can be held personally liable for the debts of the company and also potentially face criminal liability.
Okay, here's another one.
Clement and the team, my question to your guest is, why choosing business rescue than a turnaround strategy? David.
Oh, thank you, David. Kylene?
So there are various benefits and advantages of business rescue, procedural and substantive benefits. I won't get into all of them now, but I'd say one of the major benefits of business rescue is that once the company goes into business rescue, there is what's called the moratorium that kicks in to protect the company. And what that means is that no legal proceedings can be taken against the company. And so it is essentially a bubble that gets placed around the company to give it breathing space while the practitioner restructures its affairs. So that's one major plus. Something else that I think is really important is, as I mentioned, is that an independent business rescue practitioner steps into the shoes of the directors once the company goes into business rescue. And this is, a practitioner is somebody who's highly knowledgeable and experienced in doing this very specialized work in restructuring a company's affairs. And so you, in essence, have someone who is able to take this financially distressed company and assist it with successfully restructuring its affairs, and at the same time balancing various stakeholders' rights and interests.
Okay. Let's go to this question before some more WhatsApp voice notes. Nick says, Clement, how is a business meant to be rescued with an additional expense? It's a farce to me. Just close the business and move on. That's a message from Nick. But Kylene, you spoke earlier about really better chances of a company surviving when it goes through this kind of process.
Yes.
And then to listen.
Yes. No, I also just want to maybe clarify something. When we talk about a successful business rescue and what actually entails a successful business rescue, Chapter 6 of the Companies Act is quite clear. There are two goals of business rescue. The primary goal, and obviously the most ideal, is to restore the company to full solvency. But the secondary goal, if it's not possible to restore the company to solvency, is to achieve a better return for creditors than what they would receive in an immediate liquidation. So the success of business rescue is not just measured by whether a company survives. If creditors are paid more in a business rescue than they would receive in a liquidation scenario, that is also considered a successful rescue. And so that is something that we look at, because when you liquidate a company, the value is destroyed, whereas business rescue is about preserving value. And if, for example, we sell the assets in the business rescue, we can sell them at market-related value and therefore receive more than we would in a liquidation where everything is sold at a fire sale value.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Clement. So my question is around liquidation, as to how does liquidation work? More so that liquidation process says that employees become preferential sort of creditors that the business then owes. So my question is, how long does liquidation take, and what needs to be sold for the employees to be paid out their money following a liquidation process that has taken place? And also I just want to understand, will the affected employees receive full amounts that are owed to them, or it will depend on what is sold and what is not sold? And my last question is, what has to be sold for the liquidation process to be said to be successful, so that all the preferential creditors, that is the employees, to be paid out?
Yeah, quite a complicated question, Kylene, because there are a few of them. So how long does liquidation take? How long before the employees can get paid, and do they get paid in full, or does it depend on what's sold during that liquidation process?
Yes. Okay, so I'll give the short and simple answer. So in a liquidation, the liquidator appointed will essentially sell all the assets and distribute the proceeds to creditors in accordance with the hierarchy in the Insolvency Act. Employees rank as a preferent creditor in a liquidation, so they do stand in line for payment above other creditors. But in terms of what they'll ultimately receive is really dependent on what the liquidator can realize in a liquidation. You know, sometimes there isn't much left in the pot for preferent creditors like employees and SARS after secured creditors have been paid. Sometimes there is enough in the pot, and then, for example, concurrent creditors, won't receive anything if there's nothing left. But ultimately, it depends on the value of the assets that have been sold and how much is actually there to be distributed to creditors, and including employees. So it really is dependent on the particular liquidation. As for how long it takes, that is also a difficult question to answer. It's the same as business rescue. You can never say up front how long the process is going to take, because there are so many factors that play a role in that process. And that's why it's so important to consult with a restructuring professional who can look at the company's unique financial position, what needs to be done, and then can actually give advice as to how long the process may take, which is also obviously never a guarantee, because business rescue and liquidation proceedings are by their nature sometimes complex. So it really depends on the particular company. But obviously I can say that, you know, the aim is never to delay or draw it out or drag it out unnecessarily. You know, a liquidator needs to go in there, do what needs to be done, and wind up the company as quickly and efficiently and as properly as possible, in the best interests of everybody concerned.
Hi, Clement. Your discussion with your specialist just brought the following picture to my head. It's when you're saving a tree that is about to die. You need to trim some of the branches, cut off some old dead branches, and then revive the tree so that it can grow instead of taking out the whole tree. That is how I see this business rescue versus collapsing of the business. That's just how I see it. Great program, Theo Pretoria.
Hi, good afternoon to you, Clement. Good afternoon to our guest there, and good afternoon to the same of the two lenders there. I just wanted to know, our rights were violated because the company claimed that they're under business rescue and all of that, and they retrenched like 90% of the company, and we were like notified 5 days. Because the 25th of July last year, they notified us, and then we had to finish on the 31st of July. And then on the retrenchment letter, it stated that they will give us 3 months salary plus our leave pay and all other benefits. But we never got anything. We only got 1 month salary. That was the month of August after July. And then we will keep on asking for our money. We never got it. They blue tick us when we WhatsApp them. And then eventually went to go open a case at the CCMA. So we went to the CCMA, and then the case was just kicked out. It was just said that the company can't pay you, just like that. But it stated on the letter. So, we tried so many platforms, and, it was a problem for us this year. I just feel that the CCMA also failed us in that regard. So, going forward, if it happens to the other people, what advice can be given in a situation like this?
Yeah. Kylene?
Clement, I obviously can't comment on what transpired in that matter, but what I can say is this is, again, just completely emphasize the importance of having the right restructuring professionals and advisors advising you in the process to make sure that your rights are fully catered for and protected, and that, an employee, for example, is not being taken advantage of. So the importance of having the right team behind you, and I know it's not always, as simple because it costs money to appoint an advisor or a restructuring professional or insolvency practitioner to look into this for you. But it is ultimately truly worth it, because then, that person who is assisting you can make sure that the correct processes are being followed and that ultimately your rights are being fully protected and catered for.
Got it. Kylene, thank you so much. You've been helpful, really helping us understand this business rescue process. Kylene Weyers is an associate director at BDO.